I am talking to Dr. Robert Hanni. And let's see. I'm going to throw you off here. I'm going to ask you, when was the happiest moment of your life?
The happiest moment of my life?
Yeah.
Probably when I married my wife.
How'd you meet your wife?
Oh, we grew up in the same small town, and I was in high school with her sister, and then learned to know her through her brother and through her sister. I mean, small town.
Yeah.
You know.
Go ahead, Doc.
The question you asked me was?
Saddest moment of your life. So you talked about the happiest.
Probably when I lost my son.
Yeah.
You know.
And you said he died from?
He had colon cancer and died in his 30s. He had 2 little boys. One was 2 years old and the other 4. It was a very, and we watched him die for 22 months. He was operated on, and the doctor came out of the operating room and said he's got 6 months, and he lasted 22. And
they were painful. The 22 months, was it?
Well, a lot of it was painful. Yeah, I remember the day before he died. He lived in Pittsburgh, Indiana, and he was a systems analyst for Best Lock Company in Indianapolis.
Is Pittsburgh, is that in Carroll County?
No, it's west of Indianapolis, Avon, Plainfield.
Oh,
well, it's
sure.
near Plainfield.
Yeah.
Or Danville.
Yeah.
Because that's where our son Bob was in the hospital. He had surgery in Danville Hospital. But, yeah, but the day before he died, he told me, he said that I got this morphine, and if I get to hurting, I just pump it a little harder. And, you know, and he died. Had wasted away to nothing. I don't think he weighed 90 pounds when he died. He started at 205, you know.
Which one of those?
The one on the far left up there.
Okay. Yeah.
He was a graduate. He graduated from Purdue. He's the only one of our kids that went to Purdue, and he was a graduate. He graduate in math education, taught for about 5 years, and said, "This isn't for me." And he went to work for Best Lock Company and was their systems analyst when he died. Beautiful part is they kept him on the payroll until the day he died.
Wow.
And he was disabled for 4 months before.
That was very generous.
Oh, yeah. Because we had made arrangements within the family. I thought I'd made arrangements that they needed $4,000 or $5,000 a month to live on, you know, that we would contribute. And he said, "No, don't worry about it. It's taken care of."
I think that's a rarity in companies.
Oh, it is.
I can't imagine a company doing that now.
Yeah, that's a no.
Okay. Who was the most important person in your life?
Probably my dad, my father.
Okay. And can you tell me about him?
Well, Dad was one that grew up. He was the 8th child in a family of 10, and was not permitted to go to high school. I mean, he went to the 8th grade 3 times because my grandpa was old Swiss and didn't think they needed high school, you know. And so my dad went to the 8th grade 3 years, 3 different times, until he was 16, so he could go to school. And he worked in furniture factories, and then he decided to get in business for himself. And he had a little furniture store and furniture upholstery shop. Did well, and most unusual place in the world. You wouldn't open a furniture store in a town of 1,500 people. There's already one there, but he did. And he didn't make a lot of money, but he was fairly successful. And
that was in Geneva?
In Geneva, okay. in Geneva, Indiana, you know.
Why didn't your grandfather let him continue his education?
Oh, they were Mennonite, and came from Switzerland, and Grandpa didn't think needed education. Go to work. When you're 16, you go to work, which my dad had to do. You know, he had to go to work in a factory. And when he was 16, my mother came from the same stock, and she had to go to work. She was the oldest of 9 children, and she had to go to work in a garment factory when she was 16 to help support the family.
Now, did your father, obviously your father didn't feel the same way.
No. My folks were adamant. My mother always wanted to be a teacher, and it didn't work out because she had to go to work when she was 16, you know. So but my mother always wanted to be a teacher. So they always thought education was important, you know.
And What are the most important lessons you've learned in life, in your life?
How important people are. I mean, that's, if you don't have people, there's nothing to it, you know.
Yeah. What would you say is your earliest memory?
When I cut my finger off,
How'd you do that?
got it in the gears of a washing machine.
How old were you?
2 or 2.5 years old. And my first recollection is sitting in a doctor's office, or being in a doctor's office with a porcelain pan with my hand over that and the blood. And I remember the doctor saying, well, there isn't enough there to hold it. It was still on, so he just whacked it off, the rest of it off.
Oh, were you anesthetized? He just...
Yeah, well, probably, not much, I don't think so.
Yeah, but you don't remember actually getting it caught.
No, I don't remember getting it caught. I just, being in the doctor's office, my first recollection. In those days, my folks bought a new washing machine, and the washing machine had a motor in the bottom, and then an arm came out, and a rod ran up the side to hook onto the agitator in the lid, and that didn't have a guard on it. And when they bought it, the dealer said, it doesn't have a guard on it, but I'll get you one. And my dad said, you found it before we got the guard, you know.
Yeah.
So I got my finger in that. But that's my first recollection.
That's your first recollection. Yeah. Are there any words of wisdom that you like to pass along?
Oh.
I like what you said about people being the most important.
I know that when I got into banking, I had an opinion of bankers because I was not a banker. Mm-hmm. But Mr. Neininger, who was a chairman of the board at the bank, decided I should be a banker after the tornado. And so he recruited me, and I was a director for about 6 years. Then I went to the bank. And my whole goal was to personalize the bank. And Dorothy Emmy will tell you that's because she worked with me. She's the one who will tell you that we tried to personalize the bank. Bankers historically were pretty stoic people and pretty adamant about, you either get a loan or you don't get a loan, and not very personable. And we tried to make the bank here a personable bank that catered to people, because Bob Fox worked for me, and Bob Fox will tell you that the first thing I told him was, remember, if we don't have customers, I don't need you. So you treat people as you want to be treated,
And what were some of the methods you did so that you'd make the bank more personable? What were some of the strategies you used?
Well, being personable with the employees.
Okay.
And I remember my office in the bank, State and Savings Alliance. It's Wells Fargo now.
Yeah.
Was right across from the teller line, and I would observe the tellers, and I would go out occasionally in the morning and get the 9 tellers. There's 9 tellers there. Get them together and say, there's a couple of things I'd like for you to do. And what's that? I said, when the customer walks up to your window, if you know their name, call them by name. Take care of their business in an orderly manner and thank them for doing business. Now, why in hell don't we do that? Because I would observe people that would never speak, tellers who would never speak to the customer. Just take care of the business and pass it on.
Yeah.
But make the customer feel like they were wanted here.
Right. Any other strategies? I'm thinking of the library, how we can improve our customer service, because you're right, it is about customer service. And
because if you don't have the customers, you don't need the employees.
Right.
And you've got a lot of people in and out of there in a day's time. A lot of people you touch base with.
And a lot of the people you see frequently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just being personable, liking people.
Yes.
I mean, and being positive. I mean, to me, it's so easy to be negative, and it's it's so important to be positive with people.
Right. So does that mean, would you give out loans to everybody, or?
No, but if we didn't, then we'd try to explain to them why we couldn't, why it wouldn't be possible, And I got swore at a few times. Banking, but I got swore at a few times as a superintendent of schools too.
Tell me about when you were superintendent of the school corporation here. How long were you superintendent?
12 years. I came here to stay 4. I mean, the university, because I was, between Purdue and Ball State, they were placing me, and one in Indiana got involved in too, but they were placing me, and they were, because they said, you interview well, you do a good job, and so you go to Monticello and stay 4 years. That's what my major professor told me, my doctoral, and so then tornado hit the 4th year, and I was planning to leave, to take another job. I mean, I was looking at a better job, and so I stayed. And I think that
you stayed to help with the
rebuilding. Because we had millions of dollars worth of damage and 3 buildings totally destroyed, and we had to go through that whole thing. And so it took about 2 years or 3 years, and then the university called and said, "I want you to go to Anderson." So I went to Anderson. They were union. Teachers were AFL-CIO, and they were in trouble. And so I turned the job down. And my major professor, Dr. Straub, really got upset with me. He said, that's really a good job. That's a big city job. And you would fit there. You could do that. I said, I know that, but I don't want to go. I said, first of all, I'm on the board of the bank. I was a director at the bank. And back then we got about $8,000 a year just for sitting on the board.
Oh, wow.
Going to a meeting. And we got a life insurance policy, and we had credit cards to work with and all that kind of stuff, And so I said for about a year I was persona non grata at Purdue and at Ball State both, because I had turned that job down. And then 2 years later, Dr. Strom called and said, will you come speak to the doctoral candidates? He said, Bob Hanni has gone to Monticello. He has become part of he identified the power structure. He has become part of the power structure. He is the power structure now. And will you tell them how that happened? I said, well, yeah. So I went over, and then then we were okay again. Then he wanted me to go to Columbus, Indiana, and I said, no, Dr. Strom, my wife likes it, the family likes Monticello. I got a good job, and I said, one of these days I'm going to change jobs. I'm going to get out of education. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to become a bank president. Okay, so he'd always had me come back and talk to the classes. How do you integrate and how do you become part of the power structure in the community? And I said first you have to identify it. And I've taught public relations classes for the university, and one of the things I'd always have the people do, and they came from all over. A lot of communities, Peru and Logansport and everywhere. Identify the power structure in your community. Name the 10 most influential people in the community.
Okay. So who were they at the time?
Well, it was different. But I thought it was interesting. Doctors were never a part of that group.
Why is that?
Because they don't get involved. They're busy working.
Too busy, yeah.
And the other group were ministers were not involved. I don't know that a minister was ever involved in the power structure of the community.
Why is that? Now, they would have time.
Yeah, they would have time. I don't know. I guess they just don't identify them as being a part of the power structure.
So who were the people in the power structure?
Well, usually some elected officials, financial people, industrial people with factory managers and people like this. People who controlled people's jobs.
Yeah.
See, ministers don't control any jobs. Doctors don't control any jobs.
Would you see women involved?
Yeah, occasionally you would, and more so now than you did 25 years ago. When you look at Monticello, head of the foundation, the head of the chamber, the head of the industrial foundation, they're all women.
Right.
Yeah.
Head
of the library.
Of the hospital.
Yeah, head of the hospital, yeah. I don't know how long she'll be there, but that's... Because Indiana University, they whittle people down.
So then you finally went back to your advisor. You and your advisor got along after that.
Oh yeah, we were in good relations because later on I presented him at Sagamore the Wabash. I was close to the governor, and so he was getting ready to retire, and so I went. I was an advisor to Bob Orr for 3 years, and I went to him and I said I'd like to have a Sagamore for my major professor, and so I went to Richmond, Indiana, at some kind of a dinner and presented it to him, And So yeah, we were on good terms.
So
then he was using me. So.
Then he was using you.
Yeah.
But he kept trying to get you to move, and you never
never made the move. Well, I tell you, I came close.
I was going to ask you, were you ever tempted to move?
Oh yeah, in 1982, right after I went to the bank, I had a meeting with a customer of the bank that I had to tell him, give him some bad news. And he was a businessman here in town, and I won't mention his name, but I remember it was a November morning, and it was cold and rainy, and I went out to his place of business. And I told him what we were going to do. I said, hereafter, if you sell a piece of equipment or product and you want to finance it, it has to be approved by me. Because we had a bunch of bad credit on the books, from him, over $1 million worth at the time.
Oh, okay.
And he got mad and he started throwing things in his office.
Not at you.
No. Ashtrays and stuff like that. And he had 3 cigarettes going at one time. And he said to me, he swore, and he said, "You're just a short-time banker. Your history." And the beautiful part, that morning I'd received a call from Indiana University, Dean Berkeley, who said, "Bob, I want you to come back into education. I got a job for you." And he said, "You don't even have to interview. You get a 3-year contract starting at $85,000 a year." Now this is 1982.
Wow.
And I was making $50 at the bank, see. And
what was the job?
It was a superintendency of a city system. And he said, and I said, "Well, let me see." So
what was the city?
Huh?
What city was it?
Evansville.
Oh, okay.
So I went out to this guy, and he was telling me I'm a short-time banker, and I said, "Well, we'll see." So I came back in the bank, and he came back, and he went up to see Paul Neininger, was still living at that time, and he was chairman of the board. And he said, this guy said, "We're gonna get this settled right now." Well, he went up to see Paul. About 30 minutes later, he came down, walked in, stuck out his hand, and said, "We're going to do business your way. Paul said so." And I said, "We just made a decision, because if it had gone the other way, I would be out of here. I would have left at that point." See, I'd only been there less than 6 months, so it worked out. It worked out fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if your customer would have decided not to have done business with you, you would have left.
If Paul Neininger hadn't supported me.
If Paul Neininger
if he hadn't supported me.
Okay.
Because he lived next door to this guy. They were neighbors, and they had a real deal going, see.
Yeah.
And I said, if he'd have let me down, so if he hadn't supported me, then I would have gotten out of banking.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to. But it worked out well. Then from then on, the bank had problems, and we had to get those straightened around, and but we got it straightened around. And
How long were you?
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
So you were superintendent for 12, and then
10. And then when I left, I did consulting work for a year, and then we opened the bank at Oxford. That banker came to me, and he said, "I want to put a bank in Monticello," but he said, "There's only one way I'm going to do it. If Bob Hanni is a part of it. If you're not a part of it, I'm not coming there." And so I had a contract with them for another 10 years, 10, 12 years, a consulting contract that I had to show up. And I showed up when I was in town. We'd go to Arizona in the winter, and I'd come back 1 week a month. But I think, they paid me $35,000 or something like that, and for several years. And then finally I said, "Hey, I'm getting old." And I was a director at the bank, and I got paid for being that, I said, I just want to get out, quit.
Yeah.
Because I've been attending board meetings for 30-some years.
Yeah.
It gets old.
So did you last the 10-year contract?
Yeah, I was with them from, about probably 12 years. I was with them 12 years.
Okay.
When I retired, then I retired. So I've retired 3 different times.
So you were in education and finances. What would you say was the proudest moment of your career?
Oh, I don't know. I enjoyed education. See, my problem was my whole life was screwed up. I came back from overseas. Joyce and I got married, and we started having a family. And then when I'm 29 years old, I decided to go back to school. I had gone to college for a couple of years after we were married, picked up just over 2 years of credits. Then I dropped out and worked in the furniture business with my parents for several years. And I said, this is what I want to do. So I went back to school and then started teaching. And so teachers don't make much money.
No, they don't.
And that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a teacher.
What did you want to teach?
Oh, I taught math and math and science and business and accounting and mainly in the business area is where I wanted to be. But so Joyce went to work for CTS Corporation. They had a plant in Bern, Indiana, next town to us, and she worked there for a year and a half. And then, good God takes care of you, I think. I mean, we decided that we'd always tithe their income. And I don't know if that does it or not, but I remember that I taught school for 2 years. The first year I made $4,900. And I left a job where I was making $12 to teach. Then the next year, but we had a little farm. We had some income there. Then the next year I made $5,400. They gave me some additional assignments. Then Purdue came along, and I don't know how, but they offered me a fellowship to get my master's degree and pay me $9,000 tax-free money for 1 year.
Now, a master's in education.
Yeah.
Okay.
In counseling and guidance. As a counselor. I graduated with a counseling degree.
Okay.
And then I went back to that school corporation for a couple of years. And then this Dr. Strom from Ball State. I took a class or two from him at Ball State. He called me one day and he said, come over, I want to talk to you. So I went over and he said, I want you to do a doctorate. I said, I don't want to do a doctorate. I said, I got a good job. I'm assistant superintendent in a small corporation. I got a farm. I got a business, interest in a business.
So you were assistant to the superintendent at this point?
In counseling and guidance, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Director of guidance in adult education. But in Bern, Geneva area.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, then Dr. Strom said, but I want you to do a doctorate. And I said, I went, what?
Mm-hmm.
He said, remember now, if you get a doctorate, you're going to have to move. You can't stay where you are. I'm going to move you. But anyway, I said, well, he said, how much money are you making? I said, $13,000 at that time. That was in the 1960s, He said, I'll promise you that much money if you can do a doctorate. I'll put you on my staff as a consultant at the university. And the thing was, Monica, the school corporation I was leaving kept me on at 40% of my salary as a consultant to them, then as a consultant to Dr. Strom. And in 1964, 65, I made $26,000, which is more money than I made working. I mean, I had fellowships and scholarships and aid and everything else from the university. He made it possible that I took a cut in pay to become superintendent of schools. When I made $26,000 that year, and the next year I became a superintendent at 20. So
that was here. So
I went to John Glenn School Corporation in South Bend.
Oh,
no.
That's right, because you were recruited, weren't you? Recruited.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, I went to Purdue, and I had a roommate at Purdue, Paul Gilman, who was a teacher. He'd been a preacher, Methodist preacher, and then a teacher. We were about the same age. We were in our 30s, and his wife was working to support the family. Wife had 3 kids. My wife, I had 5 kids at home, and I didn't work. And he said to me one day, "How the hell do you do this?" I said, "I'm here on a fellowship." "You're what?" And just scolded him. He stopped by here a year ago, and he still scolds him to talk about. He said, "You take those $4 naps." And he said, "I was taking $4 naps. I get $4 to take a nap in the afternoon." And I said, "Well, I just got lucky." I said, "I was recruited to go to Purdue, and I don't know how. I was recruited. To this day, I don't know. But there were 5 of us from the state of Indiana. There were 25 of us in the group. I always told them they were slow learners, but that's why they took us. But we were all over the United States."
Now, were you the oldest in that group?
No.
Or were you about the same age?
No, I was. I was middle. We had some guys in their 40s, early 40s. Mm-hmm. People from California and Oregon and South Dakota, North Dakota, Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, from all over, And we had a professor, I'll tell you this, we had a professor one time, Don Schrader, was finishing his doctorate at Purdue, and he was our professor. And he made the mistake of saying one time, everyone in this group, and they put us through the Wechsler and Stanford today, all the IQ tests, yeah. And he stood before the class and said, everyone in this class has a higher IQ than I have. And he said, I'm 129. Well, we ran him out of class. I mean, here's adults. I always felt guilty about this because he was so intimidated by the group that he quit teaching. He'd bring films and show them. And we'd sit there and say, oh, we're going to see Bugs Bunny today, you know.
What happened to that guy?
He went to San Jose State as a professor when he finished his doctorate at Purdue.
Yeah.
But I always felt a bunch of adults acting like little kids, you know, and we intimidated him. But if he hadn't said that, it would have never happened, you know.
Yeah. Or show movies.
Yeah.
Every time you moved up, did you ever consult with Joyce, your wife, about those changes?
Oh yeah. You know, she'll tell you that she married a carpet layer. She didn't marry a superintendent of school or a banker.
A carpet layer?
Yeah, because that's what I did.
That's where you started out as.
That's where I started out in the furniture. Yeah. I was the carpet layer, and the furniture I did delivering. You know, my folks worked in the store, and I got the end jobs. And so I laid a lot of carpet in my time over in Fort Wayne area.
Now, you have 5 children.
Six. Yeah.
Now, were they all close in age?
Well, the first 5 in 10 years. And then Dwayne is 8.5 years younger than Don. Our youngest is 8.5 years younger.
Tell me about raising such a large family. How did you manage? Did you help out with the housework or the child rearing?
Well, Joyce did. She raised the family. Because, like, when I went back to school, I mean, she had to agree to that. And when I went back to school to do my doctorate, I mean, she raised the family. Because that year that I was in residency, you know, I didn't spend much time at home. She had built a new house, or we built a new house, and we moved into that house the year I was doing my doctorate. And I'll tell you, in a small town, Bob Hanni quit his job. He's got a big family. Mm-hmm. He's not working. How does he make it?
Yeah.
And people would say to my mother, what's happened to him? And she'd say, don't worry about Bob. I think he's got it all together. Yeah. But, you know, I had enough income. We didn't have to worry about it. And I say, we built this new house. And so I spent a lot of time in a bedroom when I was working on the dissertation and getting ready for the orals, you know.
Right.
And most people don't understand that. And my dad, you asked the most important person, my dad didn't go to high school. And one time I got thrown out of high school when I was a senior. I was 16 years old when I was a senior. And see, you couldn't get thrown out unless you were 16. I mean, you couldn't get expelled. Mm-hmm. So I got expelled.
Why'd you get expelled?
Some guys and I decided to go to an afternoon movie. We took off and went to the movie in the afternoon and thought they wouldn't catch us, and they did. And so the principal said, you know, you go home for 3 days. But those 3 days were a long 3 days because he got a hold of my dad and told him. And in a small town. And so my dad said to me, Robert, for the next week, any place I go, you're going with me. If I go to the service station, you're going to go. If I go to the grocery, you're going to go. Go to church, we're going to go. But you're going to be with me. Mm-hmm. You just be like a dog tagging along. And all my buddies, you know, were making fun of me and everything else. But he said, I never forget, he said, you abused the privilege. He said, I never had the privilege of going to school. You had the privilege of going to school and you've abused it. And you better not do that again.
And that was just one afternoon that you skipped school?
Yeah, one afternoon we skipped school, went to a movie, yeah. So he made it. But anyway, when I got ready to do the doctorate, you know, I need someone to talk to. So I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I've been offered this deal. And he said, Bob, I don't know what a high school diploma is. I don't know what a baccalaureate or a master's or a doctorate. I don't know what those things are. The only thing I know is if my son wants it, he'll go get it. So it's up to you. And that's all I needed was his support. But when I came back from service and we were married and I was going to college, I needed some help financially. And I remember I went to him and he said, no, I can't help you financially. I can give you a job. You can go to work here. But I'm not going to help you financially. Because I had GI Bill, but that wasn't enough to carry us. Yeah. So anyway, it always bothered him. So 10 years later, my brother got married when he was a sophomore in college. And my dad said, I told him if he get married, I wasn't going to help him. He said, what do you think? I said, don't make the same mistake twice. He said, you don't care if I help him. I said, Dad, I'm going to be upset if you don't help him. And so he said, then I'm okay with you. You're okay with that if I help him. I said, yeah, go help him. Help him now. Don't worry about it later,
Yeah.
So he always felt bad about that.
What did you feel when he turned you down?
Oh, rejected. Yeah. And so when I say I never really enjoyed the business, being in business, I didn't enjoy that because that isn't what I wanted to do.
How long did you work for your father?
Oh, not probably 9 years.
Oh my God! For a job you didn't enjoy, you did it an awfully long time.
I enjoyed meeting people, and it was good for me from that standpoint because Joyce will tell you I was a very bashful person, very backward. I mean, I would cross the street to keep from speaking to girls I went to school with. I did. Because I was that timid.
So how did you get Joyce to marry you then?
Well, being in service helped. I was in service from the time I was 18 till I was 20. And I was an instructor. So I learned to deal with people, and like people, And then being in business helped, meeting the public. I mean, being forced to be in the public. Yeah.
Now, so you told me how you met Joyce, but how did you propose to her? How did you court her?
Well, we went together before I went to service, and then we got engaged the day before I left for service, and then we got married. I don't know. We were going to get married right when I got home, and then we had a fuss and didn't. And so it was about a year after I came home from service, then we got married. But it was gone for. We were going to get married. It was a foregone conclusion. But as kids, we fussed.
Yeah. How did you know it was a foregone conclusion? You just knew you were going to marry Joyce?
No, I loved her. Yeah, and she was always there for me.
So, did you think she was the one?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
And Joyce felt the same way?
Evidently. I don't know.
Should ask her.
Yeah.
Okay, one last question. How has your life been different than what you imagined? Has your life been different than what you had imagined?
Well, I tell you, what I wanted to do when I was young was be in radio.
Oh, but you were on radio.
Yeah, here. But back in the days when I was young, I saw myself getting in the radio and doing sports broadcasting and on radio, And so I remember one time WBAT in Marion, Indiana had a job open. At the time, I was making $75 a week and had a couple of little kids. And I went to interview, and they offered me $45 a week. And so that kind of took care of it,
Yeah.
Couldn't do it. Right?
What's that?
Would it have been as a sports broadcaster?
With just everything.
Everything.
In a small radio station,
Okay.
Yeah, and I did some basketball for a station in Portland, Indiana at one time in the 50s, and I mean, it was just a sideline. And then I did here for about 3 years. I guess I had that radio show, didn't I?
Were you a disc jockey, you mean?
Huh?
Were you the disc jockey?
Yeah.
You still got your tapes in there.
Huh?
You still got those tapes in there.
Okay.
How long were you? Oh, 3 years. When did you have time?
Well, I did it at night.
Okay.
And, I do up the radio station here and sit there in the window and play dish. It was World War II music.
Right.
The big band sound.
Yeah.
Glenn Miller was my favorite, and I know one time I did a whole show of Glenn Miller. Talked about the history and all that. And I remember Don the next day said, "How did you know so much about him?" I said, "Well, I lived it. I knew him," and I said I read a lot about him, so I was aware of, that he went down over the Atlantic and his plane was lost and he was never found and all that kind of stuff. And I said his music was my kind of music. I loved that big band sound.
Not Artie Shaw, Glenn Miller.
Oh yeah, Artie Shaw too, but mostly Glenn Miller.
Nat King Cole.
Huh?
Nat King Cole.
And Nat King Cole. Yeah, I love Nat King Cole too.
Yeah.
Good voice.
So, is there anything else you want to share?
No, what are we going to do with this? You going to put it on Facebook?